The restaurant smelled like garlic and basil, mixed with the sharp tang of expensive wine that cost more than my rent. My feet ached in the cheap black flats I'd bought at a discount store 3 months ago, the soles worn so thin I could feel every crack in the marble floor beneath me. I'd been on my shift for 6 hours straight, weaving between tables of people who didn't see me. Not really. I was just the girl who refilled water glasses and smiled on command. "Table 12 needs more bread," Sarah hissed as she rushed past me, her tray loaded with steaming plates of osso buco. I nodded, tucking a strand of dark hair behind my ear. It had escaped from the tight bun Mrs. Chen insisted we wear. Everything about Stella Knott screamed elegance I could never afford to experience as a customer. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over white tablecloths, and soft piano music drifted from the corner where someone played Chopin. The clientele wore watches that could pay off my student loans. I wore a polyester uniform that made me sweat. I grabbed the bread basket from the kitchen, the warmth seeping through the cloth napkin into my palms. Table 12 was in the back corner, partially hidden by a marble column, the kind of table people requested when they wanted privacy. I'd learned not to linger at those tables, not to make eye contact, not to hear conversations I shouldn't hear. But as I approached, I heard something that made me stop. Crying. Small, frightened, hiccuping sobs. I peered around the column and saw him. A little boy, maybe 5 years old, with dark curls and enormous brown eyes swimming with tears. He sat alone at the table, his small hands gripping the edge like it was a life raft. His lips trembled as he looked around the restaurant, clearly terrified. My heart clenched. I glanced around for his parents but saw no one approaching. The surrounding tables were occupied by business people absorbed in their conversations, oblivious to the frightened child. I shouldn't get involved. Mrs. Chen had strict rules about bothering customers, especially at the expensive tables. But I couldn't just walk away. "Hey, sweetie," I said softly, crouching down beside his chair so I was at his eye level. "Are you okay?" He looked at me with those huge, terrified eyes and said something in rapid Italian. His voice broke on the words, fresh tears spilling down his cheeks. My mind raced. I'd spent a semester in Rome during college, back when I still believed I'd become a translator, before my father got sick and I had to drop out to help with bills. My Italian was rusty, but the boy's distress cut through any uncertainty. "Non piangere, tesoro," I whispered, reaching out to gently touch his small hand. "Don't cry, sweetheart. Sei al sicuro. Va tutto bene. You're safe. Everything's okay." His eyes widened, and he grabbed my hand with both of his, holding on tight. The words tumbled out of him. He couldn't find his papa. He didn't know where he was. Everything was scary and loud, and he wanted to go home. "Shh, shh," I soothed, switching fully into Italian. It came back to me like muscle memory, the words flowing easier as I focused on calming him. "We'll find your papa, I promise. What's your name?" "Marco," he whimpered. "Marco, that's a strong name. I'm Alessia." I smiled at him, squeezing his hand. "Your papa is here somewhere, I'm sure of it. Did he go to the bathroom? Or maybe to talk to someone?" Marco nodded, sniffling. He said, "Wait here. But it's been so long and I got scared." "I know, honey. But you were so brave, sitting here waiting. Your papa will be so proud of you." I kept talking to him in Italian, telling him about the restaurant, asking about his favorite foods, anything to distract him from his fear. His grip on my hand slowly loosened, and his breathing steadied. A small, tentative smile even appeared when I told him about the chocolate cake in the kitchen that was taller than he was. I was so focused on Marco that I didn't notice the change in the restaurant's atmosphere at first. It was subtle, a hush that spread like ripples in water, conversations dropping in volume or stopping altogether. The piano player's hands faltered on the keys for just a moment. Then I felt it. A presence. The air itself seemed to shift, growing heavier, charged with something I couldn't name. "Marco." The voice came from behind me, deep, controlled, but with an undercurrent that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It wasn't loud, yet it cut through every other sound in the restaurant like a blade. I looked up and forgot how to breathe. He stood 3 feet away, and everything about him screamed danger wrapped in expensive fabric. His suit was black, perfectly tailored to a frame that spoke of controlled power. The white shirt beneath was crisp, the top button undone, revealing a glimpse of tanned throat, but it was his face that held me frozen. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could have been carved from marble, and eyes so dark they were almost black. Those eyes were fixed on Marco with an intensity that made me want to step between them to shield the child. But then Marco cried out, "Papa!" and launched himself from the chair into the man's arms. My mind stuttered. This was Marco's father? The man caught him effortlessly, and something in his expression shifted, softened just for a moment as he held the boy against his chest. Marco buried his face in his father's neck, babbling in Italian about how scared he'd been. "Mi dispiace, Marco," the man murmured, his voice lower now, almost gentle. His large hand cradled the back of Marco's head, with a tenderness that seemed at odds with everything else about him. "I'm sorry." I started to stand, to back away and disappear like I should have done from the beginning, but those dark eyes snapped to me, pinning me in place. Up close, he was even more overwhelming. He couldn't have been much older than 30, but he carried himself with an authority that made age irrelevant. There was something leonine about him, beautiful and lethal in equal measure. The scent that reached me was cedar, and something darker, something that made me think of smoke and expensive whiskey. "You speak Italian." It wasn't a question. His accent was thick, native, and did something strange to my pulse. Yes. A little. I stopped myself, realizing I was babbling. Marco was upset. I just wanted to help. His gaze moved over me slowly, and I became acutely aware of my worn uniform, my practical shoes, the flyaway hairs escaping my bun. I felt examined, catalogued, weighed and measured in a way that made my skin prickle. "What did you say to him?" "I told him he was safe, that we'd find you." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "He was scared. And you comforted him, in my language." There was something in the way he said, "my language." Possessive, claiming, that made me shiver. Behind him, I noticed for the first time that he wasn't alone. 2 men stood a respectful distance away, both built like walls and wearing dark suits. They watched everything with sharp eyes, their hands resting at their sides in a way that suggested they were ready to move at any second. One of them was speaking quietly into a phone, his gaze never leaving his boss and the child. "I should get back to work," I said, taking a step back. "I'm glad Marco found you." "Your name." It was a command, not a request. Something in me bristled at the tone, even as another part, a stupider part, wanted to answer immediately. "Alessia," I said, then cursed myself for giving him even that much. "Alessia." He repeated it slowly, tasting each syllable. The way my name sounded in his accent made my stomach flip. "Italian name, Italian tongue. But you work here, serving bread and wine." Heat flooded my cheeks. There was no judgment in his voice, just observation, but I felt the weight of it anyway, the reminder of everything I'd left behind, everything I'd lost. "Yes," I said simply, lifting my chin. I wouldn't apologize for honest work. Something flickered in his dark eyes. Approval? Interest? I couldn't tell. Marco lifted his head from his father's shoulder, looking at me with those big brown eyes. "Grazie, Alessia," he said softly. "Thank you." My heart melted. "Prego, tesoro." "You're welcome, sweetheart." The man's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He shifted Marco in his arms, then reached into his jacket. I tensed instinctively, but he only pulled out a wallet, black leather, thick with cards and cash. He extracted several bills, far too many, and held them out to me. "No," I said immediately, shaking my head. "I don't want your money. I was just helping a scared child." His eyebrows rose slightly, as if I'd surprised him. "You refuse?" "Yes." We stared at each other for a long moment. The restaurant seemed to have disappeared around us, the soft murmur of conversation and clinking silverware fading into nothing. All I could see were those dark eyes, studying me like I was a puzzle he was determined to solve. "Interessant," he murmured. "Interesting." He slipped the money back into his wallet with one hand. The other still held Marco securely and tucked it away. Then he shifted, turning slightly, and I saw his profile. There was a scar along his jaw, thin and pale, barely visible. It should have made him less intimidating. Instead, it made him more dangerous, a reminder that this beautiful face had seen violence. "Enzo," he said, not looking away from me. "Get her information." One of the men behind him stepped forward, pulling out a phone. My pulse spiked. "Wait, what? No, I don't." "You were kind to my son," the man said, his voice soft but implacable. "That matters. I wish to know who you are. You know my name. That's all you need." His lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. It was more predatory than that, the expression of someone who always got what he wanted. "We'll see." He turned then, carrying Marco toward the exit. The two men fell into step behind him. But Enzo, the one with the phone, lingered for just a moment, his eyes on me. There was something apologetic in his expression, but also resigned, as if he knew resistance was futile. Then they were gone, and I could breathe again. My hands were shaking. I pressed them against my apron, trying to steady myself. What had just happened? Who was that man? The way everyone in the restaurant had reacted to his presence, the security detail, the casual authority. He wasn't just wealthy. He was something else entirely. Something dangerous. "Alessia!" Mrs. Chen's sharp voice cut through my thoughts. "Table 7 needs their check. Stop standing around." I jolted into motion, grateful for the distraction, but as I moved through the rest of my shift, I couldn't shake the feeling of those dark eyes on me. Couldn't forget the way he'd said my name, like he was claiming it. Couldn't stop wondering why he wanted my information. I told myself it didn't matter. Rich men came into the restaurant all the time. By tomorrow, he'd forget the waitress who spoke Italian to his son. But deep down, in a place I didn't want to examine too closely, I knew that wasn't true. I knew, with a certainty that felt like ice in my veins, that I'd just made a terrible mistake. And I had no idea what it was going to cost me. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the thin curtains of my studio apartment, dust motes dancing in the golden beams. My alarm hadn't gone off yet, which meant I'd woken naturally, a rare luxury. For a moment, I let myself stay cocooned in the cheap sheets, listening to the sounds of the city waking up below, car horns, distant sirens, the rumble of the subway beneath the building. Then yesterday came rushing back, and my stomach twisted. I sat up, rubbing my eyes. It had just been a strange encounter. Nothing more. The man, Marco's father, had probably already forgotten about it. Rich people didn't follow up on random interactions with service workers. I was being paranoid. Still, as I showered in the cramped bathroom with its perpetually dripping faucet, I couldn't shake the memory of those dark eyes studying me, the way he'd commanded his associate to get my information, as casual as ordering coffee. I dressed quickly in jeans and an old sweater, then grabbed my backpack. Tuesdays were my day off from Stella Notte, which meant I had my other job, tutoring English at the community center across town. The pay was minimal, but it felt good to use my language skills, even in this small way. It reminded me of who I'd wanted to be, before life had other plans. The subway was packed with morning commuters, and I squeezed into a corner, my body pressed against the doors. The mechanical voice announced each stop in that bored monotone that had become the soundtrack of my life. I closed my eyes, trying not to think about the fact that I was 26. And this was my existence, 2 jobs that barely covered rent, student loans I'd never finish paying, dreams that felt more distant every day. The community center was in a neighborhood that the city's tourism board didn't advertise. Graffiti covered most walls, and the buildings sagged with age and neglect. But inside the center, Mrs. Rodriguez had created something beautiful. A safe space with colorful murals, donated books lining the walls, and the constant smell of coffee and hope. "Alessia!" She greeted me with her usual warm hug, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Your students are already here. They're excited to tell you about their weekend." I smiled, feeling some of the tension from yesterday ease. This, at least, was simple, uncomplicated. My morning class was a group of recent immigrants, a mix of ages and backgrounds, all struggling with English, all desperate to build better lives. Maria from El Salvador, who cleaned offices at night, Dmitry from Ukraine, who'd been an engineer back home and now worked construction, Lynn from China, whose hands were always stained with paint from her job at a factory. They made me feel less alone in my own struggles. "Okay, everyone," I said, settling into the worn chair at the front. "Let's practice conversational English. Who wants to start?" We were halfway through the lesson, laughing at Dimitri's attempt to pronounce thorough, when Mrs. Rodriguez appeared in the doorway. Her expression was odd, worried and curious at once. "Alessia, there's someone here to see you." My heart lurched. "Who?" "He didn't say, but he's—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "He's waiting in my office." I excused myself from the class, my mind racing. Had something happened to my mother? No, they would have called. A problem with my apartment? But my landlord had never come in person before. Mrs. Rodriguez's office was tiny, crammed with filing cabinets and motivational posters. And standing in the center, looking completely out of place in his expensive suit, was Enzo, one of the men from last night. "Miss Russo," he said, nodding politely. His accent was thick, Italian, and his face was carefully neutral. "How did you find me?" The question came out sharper than I intended. "Mr. Valentino asked me to locate you." Mr. Valentino, so that was his name. The father. The man with eyes like midnight. Why? I crossed my arms, trying to ignore the fear creeping up my spine. Enzo reached into his jacket. I flinched, but he only pulled out an envelope, cream-colored and heavy. He held it out to me. "Mr. Valentino wishes to express his gratitude for your kindness to his son. He's invited you to dinner tonight. A car will pick you up at 7. I stared at the envelope like it might bite me. "I don't understand. I just talked to his kid for 5 minutes. Mr. Valentino values loyalty and kindness, especially toward Marco." Enzo's expression softened slightly. The boy hasn't stopped talking about the nice lady who spoke to him in Italian. It meant something. That's very kind, but I can't accept. Please thank Mr. Valentino for the invitation." Enzo didn't move. He was quite clear that he wished to see you again. And I'm being quite clear that I can't. I have work tonight. It was a lie. My shift didn't start until tomorrow, but I needed an escape route. Mr. Valentino is not accustomed to being refused. There it was. Beneath the polite words, a warning. The fear in my spine spread, turning my blood cold. "Well, he'll have to get used to it," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. "I'm not interested in having dinner with strangers, no matter how wealthy they are. And I don't appreciate being tracked down at my job." For a moment, Enzo just looked at me. Then, surprisingly, something like respect flickered across his face. "I will relay your message," he said quietly. He set the envelope on Mrs. Rodriguez's desk. "But Miss Russo, a word of advice. Mr. Valentino is not a man who accepts rejection easily. It would be simpler to accept his gratitude gracefully." "Simpler for whom?" He didn't answer, just nodded once and left, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. I stood there, staring at the envelope. My hands were shaking again, just like they had last night. This was wrong. Everything about this was wrong. Normal people didn't send associates to track down waitresses. Normal people didn't react to a polite refusal with veiled warnings. Who was Dante Valentino? Back in the classroom, I couldn't concentrate. My students noticed, asking if I was okay. I smiled and lied, saying I was just tired, but my mind kept circling back to the envelope, still sitting on Mrs. Rodriguez's desk where I'd left it. After class, I couldn't help myself. I opened it. Inside was a card, heavy stock with elegant script. Just an address and a time, 8 p.m. tonight, not 7 like Enzo had said. Below that, a single line in Italian. Marco would like to see his new friend again. And beneath the card, a stack of $100 bills that made my vision blur. More money than I made in 2 months. I shoved it all back in the envelope, my heart pounding. This was manipulation, pure and simple. Using a child's affection to pressure me, using money to tempt me. It was working. I thought about my overdue electric bill, the medical debt from my father's final hospital stay, the hole in my left shoe that I'd been ignoring because I couldn't afford to replace them yet. No. No, I wouldn't be bought. Whatever game Dante Valentino was playing, I wanted no part of it. I made it through the rest of the day on autopilot, then headed home as the sun began to set. The subway was less crowded now, and I found a seat, pressing my forehead against the cool window. The city blurred past, a stream of lights and shadows. My apartment building was called the Valencia, though there was nothing remotely Spanish or elegant about it. The elevator had been broken for 3 weeks, so I climbed the 5 flights of stairs, my legs burning by the time I reached my floor. I was fishing for my keys when I noticed him. A man stood at the end of the hallway, partially hidden in shadow, not Enzo. Someone else. Bigger, with a scar running down the side of his face visible even in the dim light. He wasn't looking at me, but I knew he was there because of Valentino. My hands fumbled with the keys. I finally got the door open and slipped inside, slamming it shut and throwing the deadbolt. My breath came in short gasps as I leaned against the door. This was insane. Who did this? Who stationed men outside someone's apartment just because they'd refused a dinner invitation? Unless it wasn't just a dinner invitation. Unless I'd stumbled into something far more dangerous than I'd realized. I moved to the window, careful to stay behind the curtain as I peeked out. Below, parked directly in front of my building where there was usually never parking, sat a black SUV. The windows were tinted, but I could see the silhouette of someone in the driver's seat, watching. Fear turned to anger, hot and sharp in my chest. I grabbed my phone, and without letting myself think about it, searched for Stella Notte's number. When the hostess answered, I asked to speak to Mrs. Chen. Mrs. Chen, it's Alessia. I need to know, did anyone ask about me today, about where I live or where else I work? There was a pause. A man came by this morning, very well dressed. He spoke with me privately, asked about your schedule, your background. He said you'd helped his son, and he wanted to thank you properly. Her voice dropped. Alessia, I didn't tell him anything sensitive, but he was very persuasive, and he left a very generous tip for the staff. I'm sorry if It's okay, Mrs. Chen. Thank you for telling me. I hung up before she could ask questions I couldn't answer, so that's how they'd found me. Money and charm, probably some intimidation mixed in. How many other people had they questioned? My landlord? The bodega owner downstairs who knew my routine? I should call the police. That was the rational response. But something stopped me. The memory of how everyone in that restaurant had reacted to Valentino's presence. The way even Mrs. Chen, who feared no customer, had sounded almost apologetic about giving him information. This was a man with power, real power, and I had no idea what he wanted from me. At 7:45, someone knocked on my door. I froze on my secondhand couch, my heart hammering. The knock came again, patient but insistent. Miss Russo! Enzo's voice muffled through the door. Mr. Valentino has sent a car for you. I already told you no, I called back, hating how my voice shook. He anticipated you might say that. He asked me to tell you that this is not a request you want to refuse. Mr. Valentino is a man of significant influence, and he has taken a personal interest in you. Fighting that interest would be unwise. There it was. Not even veiled anymore. A threat, delivered in polite words. I stood up, my legs unsteady, and walked to the door. I didn't open it. And if I call the police? A long silence. Then, Mr. Valentino has many friends, Miss Russo. In many places. Please don't make this difficult. He truly does just want to thank you and allow Marco to see you again. One dinner. That's all he asks. One dinner. As if this would end there. As if men who sent security details to track down waitresses ever stopped at one dinner. But what choice did I have? He knew where I lived, where I worked. He had people watching me, and beneath Enzo's polite words was a clear message. Resistance would make things worse. Give me 10 minutes, I said finally, defeat bitter on my tongue. Of course. The car is waiting downstairs. I heard his footsteps retreat, and I pressed my forehead against the door, fighting the urge to cry. This was wrong. Everything about this was wrong, but I was trapped. I changed quickly, choosing the only dress I owned that wasn't my uniform, a simple navy blue sheath I'd bought for my father's funeral. I pulled my hair down from its usual bun, let it fall around my shoulders, then immediately second-guessed the decision and started to put it back up. No. I wouldn't primp for Dante Valentino. I wouldn't play whatever game he expected. I grabbed my phone, made sure it was charged, and took a photo of the address on his card. I texted it to my friend Rachel with a message. Going to dinner here. If you don't hear from me by midnight, send help. Her response came immediately. WTF? Are you okay? I'll explain later. Just please, remember this address. Okay, but I'm calling you at 11. It wasn't much of a safety net, but it was something. Downstairs, the black SUV waited, and Enzo held the door open. The interior was leather and luxury. So far removed from my world, it might as well have been another planet. As we pulled away from the curb, I watched my building disappear in the side mirror, and wondered if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. The restaurant was nothing like Stella Nata. We didn't pull up to a busy street with valet parking and crowds of people waiting for tables. Instead, the SUV turned down a narrow alley, then through a gate that opened as we approached. We drove into a private courtyard surrounded by old brick buildings, their windows glowing with warm light. Ivy crawled up the walls, and I could hear the distant sound of water. A fountain, maybe. This wasn't a restaurant. This was someone's home. My pulse quickened as Enzo opened my door. The evening air was cool against my skin, carrying the scent of jasmine and something cooking. Garlic, tomatoes, herbs. Despite my fear, my stomach growled. I hadn't eaten since breakfast. This way, Miss Russo. He led me through a door into a space that stole my breath. The interior was all exposed brick and dark wood, with soaring ceilings and chandeliers that looked like they belonged in a cathedral. Artwork covered the walls, real art, the kind I'd only seen in museums. Everything spoke of old money, old power, old secrets. My cheap dress suddenly felt even more inadequate. We climbed a staircase, our footsteps echoing on marble, and I noticed cameras in every corner. Security wasn't just outside. It was woven into every inch of this place. How many people were watching me right now? Enzo stopped at a set of double doors, knocked once, then pushed them open. The room beyond was a private dining room, intimate and dimly lit. Candles flickered on a table set for two, the china and crystal catching the light. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city, the light spreading like stars fallen to earth. And standing by those windows, his back to me, was Dante Valentino. He'd changed from his suit into something slightly less formal, black slacks and a black shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. Even in silhouette, he commanded the space, made it his. "Thank you, Enzo," he said without turning. His voice was quieter than I remembered, but no less compelling. "Leave us." I heard the doors close behind me with a soft click that sounded like a cell door locking. Dante turned, and I forgot how to breathe again. In the candlelight, he was even more striking than he'd been in the restaurant. The shadows carved his face into sharp planes and dangerous angles, and those dark eyes found mine with an intensity that made my knees weak. He studied me slowly, taking in my simple dress, my loose hair, my defiant expression. "You came?" he said finally. Did I have a choice? The words came out sharper than I intended, but I was too frightened to be polite. Something flickered in his expression. Not anger, but something darker. More complicated. There is always a choice, Alessia. Is there? Because your man made it sound like refusing would have consequences. He moved toward me with a predator's grace, each step measured and deliberate. I wanted to back away, but forced myself to stand still. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me retreat. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that I could smell his cologne again. Cedar and smoke, and something that made my head spin. "Enzo can be overly cautious," Dante said. "I asked him to persuade you, not threaten you. If he overstepped, I apologize. You sent someone to my job, to my apartment. You had me followed. I wanted to ensure you accepted my invitation. By stalking me?" His jaw tightened. "By showing you that I was serious about my gratitude. That's not gratitude. That's intimidation." We stared at each other in the candlelight, and I saw something shift in his expression, surprise maybe, that I was pushing back. Most people probably didn't. "You're not afraid of me," he said, and it wasn't a question. "I'm terrified of you," I corrected. "But I don't like being manipulated." A slow smile curved his lips, transforming his face from merely handsome to devastating. It was the kind of smile that probably made women do stupid things. I felt its pull and hated myself for it. "Honest," he murmured. "Marco said you were kind. He didn't mention you were also brave." "I'm not brave. I'm just tired of powerful men thinking they can do whatever they want." The smile faded. "And you think that's what I am? A powerful man who takes what he wants? Aren't you?" He considered this, tilting his head slightly. "Yes," he said finally. "I am. But I don't take from those who can't afford to give. You showed my son kindness when you had no reason to, when there was nothing in it for you. That kind of goodness is rare in my world, Alessia. I wanted to thank you properly. With surveillance and veiled threats? With dinner." He gestured to the table. "Please, sit. The food will get cold." I wanted to refuse, wanted to walk out and never look back. But something in his voice, in the way he looked at me, made me hesitate. Beneath the authority and danger, I heard something else. Something lonely. And I was still trapped here, wasn't I? Might as well eat. I moved to the table and sat, hyper-aware of him as he took the seat across from me. He moved with such control, such precision, like every gesture was calculated. When he reached for the wine bottle, his hands were steady, the hands of someone who never doubted his right to take up space in the world. He poured deep red wine into my glass, then his own, a Barolo from my family's vineyard in Piedmont. "Your family has a vineyard?" I took a sip. It was the best wine I'd ever tasted, smooth and complex and worth more than my monthly rent. "My family has many things." He watched me over the rim of his glass. "Tell me about yours." "Why?" "Because I want to know you. You don't know anything about me except that I speak Italian and work at a restaurant. Why do you care?" He set his glass down, and his gaze pinned me in place. "Because in my world, most people want something from me. Money, power, protection, connections. But you refused my money. You refused my invitation. You looked at me yesterday like you couldn't care less who I was." He leaned forward slightly. "Do you know how rare that is? Maybe I just don't know who you are." "You don't," he agreed. "But you sense danger. I saw it in your eyes yesterday, and I see it now. Yet you came anyway. Why?" "Because your man made it clear I didn't have a real choice. There is always a choice," he repeated. "You could have called the police. You could have run. But you got in the car. Why?" I met his gaze, refusing to look away. "Because running from men like you doesn't work. You have too much power, too many resources. Fighting you head-on would be stupid. So I came to figure out what you actually want from me." He smiled again, but this time it reached his eyes, warming them. Intelligent as well as brave and kind. Marco has excellent taste in heroes. I'm not anyone's hero. You're his. Do you know he had a nightmare last night? He woke up crying, and when I asked what was wrong, he said he'd dreamed he couldn't find the nice lady again, the one who spoke his language and made him feel safe. Dante's expression softened in a way that transformed him. He's had a difficult year. His mother, my wife, died 8 months ago. Cancer. He's been struggling with English, with the new school, with everything. Yesterday was the first time I've seen him smile in weeks. My heart clenched. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. How could you? But now you understand why I wanted to find you. Why I needed to thank you. He paused. Marco asked if you could have dinner with us. He's upstairs now, fighting sleep because he wants to see you. Guilt and suspicion warred in my chest. You're using your son to manipulate me. I'm telling you the truth, whether you believe it is your choice. He stood, walked to a side table, and pressed a button. But perhaps you'd like to see for yourself. A moment later, the doors opened, and Enzo entered with Marco in his arms. The little boy wore pajamas covered in dinosaurs, his dark curls messy, his eyes heavy with sleep. But when he saw me, his face lit up. Alessia! He squirmed out of Enzo's grip and ran to me, throwing his small arms around my neck. Papa said you were coming. I drew you a picture. He thrust a piece of paper at me, a child's drawing of what I assumed was me, with wild dark hair and a big smile, standing next to a smaller figure that must have been him. Above us, he'd drawn a yellow sun with a smiley face. Something in my chest cracked open. Marco, this is beautiful. Thank you. Will you come have breakfast with us tomorrow? Papa makes really good pancakes and we can play with my cars and… Marco, Dante said gently, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. Alessia is very busy. We can't ask her to… I'd love to, I heard myself say. What was I doing? This was dangerous. This was stupid. But Marco looked at me with such hope, such uncomplicated joy, that I couldn't say no. Dante's eyes widened slightly, the first time I'd seen him truly surprised. You're sure? For Marco, yes. Just for Marco? I ignored the question. What time? 9. I'll send Enzo. No. I shook my head firmly. No more cars, no more surveillance. Give me the address, and I'll find my own way here. He studied me for a long moment, and I could practically see him calculating, weighing options. Finally, he nodded. As you wish. Enzo took Marco back upstairs, the boy waving at me until he disappeared through the doors. Alone again with Dante, the room felt smaller, the air thicker. You surprised me, he said, returning to his seat. Again. Good. You look like you need surprising more often. He laughed, an actual laugh, rich and warm and genuine. It transformed his face completely, made him look younger, almost carefree. Perhaps I do. Dinner arrived then, brought by silent staff who served us and disappeared like ghosts. The food was incredible. Homemade pasta with a sauce that tasted like summer in Italy, fresh bread that steamed when broken open, vegetables roasted to perfection. We ate in companionable silence for a while, and I felt some of my tension ease. Tell me, Dante said eventually, how does someone with your intelligence, your language skills, end up serving tables? The question hurt more than it should have. Life doesn't always go according to plan. No, it doesn't. He refilled my wine glass. But I'm curious about your plan. What did you want to be? A translator, or an interpreter. I spent a semester in Rome, studied at the university there. I trailed off, remembering those golden months when I'd thought anything was possible. It was the best time of my life, but my father got sick. Cancer, like your wife. I came home to help with his care, and by the time he died, I had too much debt to go back. So I work. I survive. I try not to think too much about what could have been. His expression had gone very still. I'm sorry. For your loss, and for your lost dreams. Don't be. At least I had time with him before he died. Some people don't even get that. I looked at Marco's drawing, still clutched in my hand. Your son is lucky to have you. I'm not sure he'd agree. I work too much. I'm not good at the soft things, the comforting things. His mother was better at that. Pain flickered across Dante's face, raw and real. I'm learning, but it's hard. Everything is hard without her. Without thinking, I reached across the table and touched his hand. You're doing better than you think. Marco adores you. I saw it in how he looked at you yesterday. How he ran to you. He feels safe with you. That's what matters. Dante stared at my hand on his. And when he looked up, something in his eyes made my breath catch. Heat. Hunger. And beneath that, a vulnerability that seemed at odds with everything else about him. You have no idea what you do to me, he said softly. I pulled my hand back, my heart racing. Dante, I know. This is inappropriate. You came here out of obligation, possibly fear. I shouldn't… He stopped, jaw clenched. But I can't stop thinking about you. Since yesterday, you've been in my head constantly. The way you spoke to Marco, the way you stood up to me, the way you look right now in this candlelight. I want to know everything about you, Alessia. Everything. You can't, I whispered. Whatever you're thinking, whatever this is, it can't happen. I'm not part of your world. Then let me into yours. You don't want that. Trust me. My world is small and poor and nothing like this. I gestured around us. I don't care about that. You should. Because eventually, you'll realize how different we are, and you'll move on to someone more suitable. And I'll be left picking up the pieces of whatever this becomes. I stood, suddenly desperate to escape. Thank you for dinner. I'll come for breakfast tomorrow, for Marco. But after that, please don't contact me again. I made it 3 steps toward the door, before his voice stopped me. Alessia. I didn't turn around. Couldn't. I haven't been able to breathe properly since my wife died, he said quietly. It's like there's a weight on my chest constantly, crushing me. But yesterday, when I saw you with Marco, when you looked at me with those defiant eyes, I breathed. For the first time in 8 months, I took a full breath. He paused. So no, I won't stop contacting you. I can't. You're heir to a drowning man. I closed my eyes, fighting against the pull of his words. That's not fair. I know. You barely know me. Then let me know you better. I turned to face him. He hadn't moved, but something in his posture had shifted. He looked less like a predator and more like a man on the edge of something he couldn't control. What do you want from me, Dante? Really? He held my gaze. Everything. The word hung between us, heavy with promise and threat. I should go, I said, though my feet didn't move. Enzo will drive you home. I can take the subway. At this hour? No. His tone left no room for argument. Please, let me at least ensure you get home safely. I nodded, too tired to fight anymore. As Enzo appeared to escort me out, Dante caught my arm gently. Tomorrow, he said, 9 o'clock. For Marco, I reminded him. His smile was dangerous. Of course. For Marco. But we both knew that was a lie. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my narrow bed, staring at the ceiling with its water stain that looked like a map of somewhere I'd never been, and tried to make sense of what was happening to me. Dante Valentino was dangerous. That much was clear. Not just because of the security detail, or the obvious wealth, or the way people reacted to his presence. He was dangerous because of the way he looked at me, like I was something precious he'd found and refused to let go. And I was dangerous to myself because part of me, a stupid, reckless part, wanted to let him hold on. At 8:30 the next morning, I stood outside my building, Marco's drawing folded carefully in my purse, and pulled up the address Dante had given me on my phone. It was in a neighborhood I'd never been to, one where the buildings had doormen and the streets were actually clean. The subway ride took 40 minutes, and with every stop, I told myself I could get off, turn around, go back to my safe, small life. But I didn't. The address led me to a brownstone on a tree-lined street that looked like something from a movie. Autumn leaves covered the sidewalk in shades of gold and red, and the morning sun filtered through the branches in dappled patterns. I climbed the steps to the front door, my hand raised to knock when it swung open. Dante stood there in jeans and a gray sweater, his feet bare, his hair slightly mussed. He looked younger like this, more approachable, though no less compelling. Those dark eyes swept over me, taking in my simple jeans and jacket, and something in his expression softened. You came, he said, and I heard genuine relief in his voice. I said I would. I wasn't sure you meant it. He stepped back, gesturing for me to enter. Please. The interior of the brownstone was warm and lived in, so different from the formal dining room last night. Toys were scattered across a plush rug in the living room, and I could smell coffee and something sweet, cinnamon maybe. Children's drawings covered the refrigerator in the kitchen, visible through an archway, and a calendar on the wall was marked with soccer practices and doctor's appointments in neat handwriting. This was a home. A real home where a father was raising his son alone. Alessia! Marco came running from somewhere upstairs, his dinosaur pajamas replaced by jeans and a striped shirt. He crashed into me with the full force of a 5-year-old's enthusiasm, and I laughed despite myself, catching him in a hug. Good morning, Marco. Are you ready for those pancakes your papa promised? Yes. And I want to show you my room and my cars and my books that Mama used to read to me, Marco. Dante said gently. Let Alessia breathe. And breakfast first, yes? We moved to the kitchen, where Dante had already started cooking. I watched him work. This powerful man who commanded fear and respect, now flipping pancakes with the practiced ease of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. He moved around the kitchen with confidence, pulling out plates, pouring orange juice, adding chocolate chips to Marco's pancakes without being asked. "Can I help?" I offered. "Sit. You're a guest." But there was no arrogance in it, just hospitality. Marco chattered throughout breakfast, telling me about his school, his friends, the movie he'd watched last night. His English was good but peppered with Italian words when he got excited, and I slipped between languages naturally, making him giggle when I understood his mixed sentences. Dante said little, but his eyes never left us. I felt his gaze like a physical touch, studying the way I interacted with his son, the way Marco leaned against me while he talked, completely comfortable. After breakfast, Marco dragged me upstairs to his room, a space filled with books and toys, and a bed shaped like a race car. He showed me everything with the unself-conscious pride of a child who knows he's loved. And on the nightstand, I saw a photo of a beautiful woman with dark hair and kind eyes, holding a baby Marco. "That's Mama," he said, following my gaze. "She's in heaven now, but Papa says she's always watching over me." My throat tightened. "I'm sure she is, and I'm sure she's very proud of you." "Do you think she'd like you?" The question caught me off guard. I don't know, sweetheart. I think she would. You're nice like she was." He climbed onto my lap, snuggling against me with the easy affection of a child starved for maternal warmth. "Will you come back again?" I looked up to find Dante standing in the doorway, his shoulder against the frame, his expression unreadable, but his hands were clenched at his sides, knuckles white. "We'll see," I said carefully. Marco seemed satisfied with that answer, and launched into showing me his extensive car collection. We played for over an hour, building elaborate tracks and racing vehicles, and I lost myself in the simple joy of it. When was the last time I'd just played? Just existed in the moment without worrying about bills or jobs or the future. Eventually, Marco's eyes started to droop. Apparently, pancakes and excitement were exhausting, and Dante scooped him up. "Nap time, Piccolino," he murmured, and Marco didn't even protest, just tucked his face into his father's neck. I followed them to Marco's bed, watching as Dante laid him down gently, pulled the covers up, and pressed a kiss to his forehead. The tenderness in the gesture made my chest ache. This was a man who loved fiercely, completely, despite the danger that surrounded him. Downstairs, Dante poured us both coffee and led me to a study lined with books. We sat in leather chairs by a fireplace, the morning light streaming through tall windows. And for a moment, neither of us spoke. "Thank you," he said finally, "for coming, for being so kind to him. He's easy to be kind to. He's a wonderful kid. He is." Dante stared into his coffee cup. "But he's struggling. He needs more than I can give him. His teachers say he's withdrawn at school, that he doesn't interact with the other children much. He has nightmares almost every night. The child psychologist says he needs stability, routine, positive female influence." He looked up at me. "He needs someone like you." Warning bells went off in my head. "Dante, I'm not asking you to replace his mother. No one could, but he's drawn to you in a way he hasn't been with anyone since Maria died. And He set his cup down, leaned forward. "I told you last night that you helped me breathe. That wasn't a line, Alessia. It's the truth. Being around you, watching you with Marco, it's the first time in months that this house has felt like a home instead of a tomb. You don't know me," I said desperately. "You've spent maybe 3 hours total in my presence. You can't make decisions based on that." "Can I? I've spent my entire life reading people, judging character in seconds because hesitation means death in my world. And I know that you're genuine, that your kindness isn't an act, that what I see is what you are." He reached across the space between us, took my hand. His palm was warm, calloused, surprisingly gentle. "Let me get to know you better. Let me give you a reason to keep coming back." "What reason could you possibly give me that I'd want?" His thumb traced circles on my palm, and the simple touch sent shivers up my arm. What do you want, Alessia? Really want? If money and circumstances weren't obstacles? I should have pulled my hand away, should have laughed off the question, but something in his eyes, in the quiet intensity of the moment, made me answer honestly. I want to finish my degree. I want to use my languages for something meaningful. I want to travel, to see the places I've only read about. I trailed off, embarrassed. Tell me. I want to not be invisible anymore. I want to matter to someone, to be seen as more than just the waitress or the tutor or the girl who couldn't make it. The admission hurt, exposing a wound I usually kept hidden. Dante's grip on my hand tightened. You matter to Marco, and you matter to me. You don't even know me, I repeated. But it sounded weaker this time. Then let me learn. He stood, pulling me up with him. And suddenly we were close enough that I could see flecks of gold in his dark eyes, could feel the heat radiating from his body. Let me help you finish your degree. Let me give you the opportunities you deserve. Let me... Buy me? I pulled my hand free, stepping back. Is that what this is? You throw money at me until I become whatever you need me to be? No. His voice was sharp. I'm offering you the life you should have had, the one that was stolen from you by circumstances. There are no strings attached. There are always strings. Fine. He moved closer, his presence overwhelming. Then yes, there are strings. I want you to spend time with Marco. I want you to have dinner with me. I want to know what makes you laugh, what makes you angry, what you dream about at 3 a.m. when you can't sleep. His hand came up, hesitated, then gently tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. I want you, Alessia. Not in some crude way, but in every way. I want you in my life, in Marco's life, in this house that's been so empty without you. My breath caught. That's insane. You're asking me to uproot my entire existence for someone I barely know. I'm asking you to take a chance, to let someone take care of you for once instead of always carrying everything alone. His fingers trailed down my cheek, feather-light. I see you, Alessia. I see how tired you are, how much weight you carry on those delicate shoulders. Let me help carry it. I wanted to. God help me. I wanted to so badly it hurt. But fear held me back. Fear of losing myself. Fear of the danger that clearly surrounded him. Fear of what would happen when this fever dream ended and reality crashed back in. I need time, I whispered. This is all too much, too fast. How much time? I don't know. I need to think, to process. You've turned my life upside down in 2 days. He nodded slowly, though I could see the frustration in the tightness of his jaw. I can give you time, but I won't stop trying to convince you. I wouldn't expect anything less. A smile tugged at his lips. There's that fire I love. You never back down, do you? Not when it matters. Good. He stepped back, giving me space to breathe. Let me drive you home. I can, please. Let me do this one thing. I nodded, too wrung out to argue. The drive back to my neighborhood was quiet. Dante at the wheel of a different car this time. Still expensive, but less conspicuous. A dark sedan instead of the SUV. He drove with the same controlled precision he did everything else, and I found myself studying his profile. The strong nose, the sharp jaw, the way his hands gripped the steering wheel with easy confidence. He was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. When we pulled up outside my building, he put the car in park, but didn't immediately unlock the doors. Alessia, he said quietly. Whatever you decide, I want you to know something. I haven't felt this alive in a very long time. You've given that back to me, and to Marco. Whatever happens, thank you for that. Before I could respond, he got out and came around to open my door. The gesture was old-fashioned, courtly, and it made my heart squeeze. Think about what I said, he murmured as I stepped out. About finishing your degree, about your dreams. I meant every word. I looked up at him. This dangerous man who somehow made me feel safer than I'd felt in years. Why me, Dante? Really? He reached out, cupped my face in his hands with a gentleness that seemed impossible from someone so hard. Because you saw my son crying and stopped to help, even though it wasn't your job. Because you refused my money and my threats with equal conviction. Because when you smile, really smile, it lights up everything around you. His thumb brushed across my cheekbone. Because you're real in a world full of people who are fake, and because when I look at you, I see home. Then he did something that stole my breath completely. He leaned down and pressed his lips to my forehead. A kiss so tender it brought tears to my eyes. "Take your time," he whispered against my skin, "but not too much. I'm not a patient man, Alessia." He released me and stepped back, and I stood there on the sidewalk, watching as he drove away. My forehead still tingled where his lips had been, and my hands trembled as I pressed them against my stomach. What was I going to do? Upstairs in my apartment, I found an envelope that had been slipped under my door. Inside was a check for an amount that made my vision blur, and a note in elegant handwriting. "For your student loans. No strings. Just a gift from someone who believes in second chances. D." I sank onto my couch, the check in my shaking hands, and finally let myself cry. Because I knew, in that moment, that I was already lost. Dante Valentino had walked into my life like a storm, and I was going to let myself be swept away. God help me. 3 weeks later, I stood in front of the university registrar's office, staring at the confirmation email on my phone. I was enrolled. After 2 years of believing it was impossible, I was going back to school to finish my degree. The check had sat on my kitchen counter for 5 days before I'd finally deposited it. Even then, I'd called Dante immediately after, my hands shaking as I held the phone. "There are no strings," he'd said before I could speak, his voice warm and certain. "This is yours. Do with it what you will. If you never want to see me again, that's your choice. But don't let pride steal your future, Alessia." I'd cried then, ugly tears of relief and fear and gratitude, and when I'd finally composed myself enough to speak, I'd whispered, "I want to see you again." The silence on the other end had stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Then, "When? Tomorrow? I'll pick you up at 7. That had been the first of many dinners. Sometimes at his brownstone with Marco chattering happily between us, sometimes at quiet restaurants where Dante's security waited discreetly at other tables. Once, memorably, at a hole-in-the-wall taco place I'd insisted on, where he'd looked completely out of place in his expensive suit, but had eaten with genuine enjoyment, declaring it the best meal he'd had in months. We talked about everything. My childhood in a working-class neighborhood where everyone knew everyone. His childhood in Italy, raised in a world of violence and loyalty, in codes I couldn't fully understand. My father's death and the grief that still felt fresh. His wife's illness, and how helpless he'd felt watching her fade. My dreams of translation work. His hopes for Marco's future, far removed from the darkness of his own life. He never explicitly told me what he did, but I wasn't stupid. The security, the deference people showed him, the way he sometimes took calls in Italian and came back with shadows in his eyes. I knew. Dante Valentino was exactly what I'd suspected from the beginning, and somehow, impossibly, I was falling for him anyway. "Alessia!" Marco's voice pulled me from my thoughts. I was at the brownstone again, had started coming 3 times a week. Marco would rush home from school to see me, and we'd do homework together, play games, read books. I'd become woven into the fabric of their lives so gradually I hadn't noticed until it was too late to extract myself. Not that I wanted to. "Look what I made in art class." He thrust a painting at me, a family portrait. Him in the middle, Dante on one side, and on the other, me, with hearts drawn all around us. My throat tightened. "Marco, this is beautiful. Mrs. Peterson said to paint our family, and your family now, right?" His eyes were so hopeful, so innocent. I looked up to find Dante in the doorway, his expression unreadable. We'd been careful around Marco, never showing more affection than appropriate. But the child wasn't blind. He saw how his father looked at me, how I looked back. "Of course she's family," Dante said quietly, "if she wants to be." The weight of those words settled over me. This was it, the moment where I had to decide. Keep pretending this was temporary, casual, or admit the truth. That I was in love with Dante Valentino, that I wanted this life with him and Marco, despite the danger. despite the impossibility of it all. I want to be, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Marco cheered and threw his arms around me. Over his head, Dante's eyes met mine, and what I saw there made me tremble. Heat and possession, and something deeper, something that promised forever, even as it terrified me. That night, after Marco was in bed, Dante poured us wine and led me out to the small garden behind the brownstone. The October air was crisp, and he draped his jacket over my shoulders without asking. It smelled like him, and I pulled it tighter around myself. "I need to tell you something," he said, standing close enough that I could feel his warmth, "about who I am, what I do. I know what you do, Dante. Do you?" His jaw tightened. "Do you know that men fear me? That I've done things, terrible things, to protect what's mine? That my world is violence and blood and shadows? I suspected, and yet you're still here." I turned to face him fully. "I'm here because of who you are with Marco. Who you are with me. Yes, I know you're dangerous. But you've never made me feel unsafe. You've given me my dreams back. You've let me into your life. And you've—" I stopped, the words catching in my throat. "I've what?" He stepped closer, his hand coming up to cup my face. "Tell me, Tesoro." The endearment in Italian undid me. "You've made me feel seen, valued, like I matter. And I know that's dangerous too, relying on someone else for those feelings. But I can't help it. I'm in too deep, Dante. Good." His other hand found my waist, pulling me against him. "Because I'm drowning in you, Alessia. I can't think straight anymore. Everything is you. Your laugh, your smile, the way you are with Marco, the way you challenge me. I want you in my life permanently. Not as Marco's tutor or companion, but as mine. What are you asking? Move in with us." The words were barely above a whisper. "I know it's fast. I know it's insane, but I can't do this anymore. These few hours at a time, then watching you leave. I want you here when I wake up. I want Marco to have you every day, not just 3 times a week. I want—" He stopped, his forehead dropping to rest against mine. "I want everything with you." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Dante, that's too much, I know, but I've never been good at half measures, Alessia. When I want something, I take it, and I want you. What about my job, my apartment, my life? Keep teaching at the community center if it makes you happy. I'll hire someone to cover your shifts at the restaurant. You shouldn't be exhausting yourself there anyway. Your apartment—" He pulled back slightly, his eyes searching mine. "You hate that apartment, the broken elevator, the leaking faucet, the walls so thin you hear your neighbors fighting. Don't pretend you'd miss it." He was right. I wouldn't. But that wasn't the point. "This is moving so fast," I said, even as my resolve crumbled. "What if it doesn't work? What if we realize this was just infatuation, or loneliness, or—" "It's not." His hands tightened on me, possessive and gentle all at once. "This is real, Alessia, the most real thing I've felt since Maria died. And yes, maybe part of it started because you helped Marco, because you reminded me what goodness looks like. But it's become so much more. You've become everything. I'm scared," I admitted. "So am I." His honesty surprised me. "I'm terrified that you'll wake up one day and realize what you've gotten yourself into and run. I'm terrified that my world will touch you, hurt you. I'm terrified that I'm being selfish, pulling you into this life. But I'm more terrified of losing you." I reached up, touching his face. The sharp jaw, the faint scar, the lips that had kissed my forehead but never my mouth. "If I do this, if I move in here, I need to know you'll protect me. Not just physically, but I need to know you won't let your world destroy me. I would burn my world to ashes before I'd let anything happen to you." The intensity in his voice left no room for doubt. "You and Marco are everything now. Everything else is secondary. Even your business? Even that." He said it without hesitation, and I believed him. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay, I'll move in." The joy that transformed his face was beautiful. He lifted me off my feet, spinning me once before setting me down, and finally, claiming my mouth with his. The kiss was everything I'd imagined, and nothing I could have prepared for. Demanding but tender, possessive but reverent, it consumed me completely. His hands tangled in my hair, tilted my head to deepen the kiss, and I melted against him, giving him everything he demanded and more. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to mine again. "Mine," he murmured. "Say it. Say you're mine." "I'm yours," I breathed. "But Dante? You're mine too. That goes both ways." His smile was fierce. "Always, Tesoro. Always." The move happened quickly. Dante sent people to pack up my apartment. I barely had anything worth keeping. And within a week I was living in the brownstone. My own room at first, Dante insisting we do this properly. But it only took 3 nights before I found myself in his bed, wrapped in his arms, finally feeling like I'd found home. Marco was ecstatic. He'd helped me unpack, chattering about how we could decorate my room even though we both knew I wasn't sleeping there. Life fell into a rhythm that felt surreal in its perfection. Mornings with Marco before school, afternoons at the community center teaching, evenings as a family with dinner and homework and laughter. Dante was different at home than the man I sometimes glimpsed when business intruded. Softer, more open, quicker to smile. He taught me to cook his mother's recipes, his hands guiding mine as we made fresh pasta. We danced in the kitchen to old Italian songs while Marco giggled at us. He read to me at night from books in Italian, his voice wrapping around me like silk. And the passion between us only grew. He was demanding in bed, possessive and intense, but always attentive to my needs. He learned my body like he learned everything, with focus and dedication, until he could play me like an instrument. I'd never been happier, but happiness in Dante's world came with a price. It was a Friday evening, 3 months after I'd moved in. Marco was at a sleepover, his first, a sign of how much he'd come out of his shell, and Dante and I were enjoying a rare night alone. We'd cooked together, drunk wine, and were curled up on the couch watching an old Italian film when his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his entire demeanor changed. The relaxed man beside me disappeared, replaced by someone harder, colder. "I need to take this," he said, already standing. "I'll be in my office." He was gone for 20 minutes, and when he came back, his face was carved from stone. "What's wrong?" I asked immediately. "Nothing you need to worry about. Dante." "Alessia." His tone was sharp. "This is the part of my life you don't get to be involved in. I told you I'd protect you from my world, and I meant it." Hurt lanced through me. "I'm not asking to be involved. I'm asking what's wrong because I can see you're upset." He closed his eyes, pinching the bridge of his nose. When he looked at me again, some of the coldness had thawed. "I'm sorry. That was unfair. There's a situation with a business associate. It needs to be handled carefully. Is it dangerous?" "Everything I do is dangerous." He pulled me against him, holding me tight. "But I won't let it touch you. I promise." I wanted to believe him, and for 2 weeks, everything seemed fine. Then the threat started. The first was a photo slipped under the door. Me, leaving the community center, unaware I was being watched. No note, just the photo. Dante's reaction was immediate and terrifying. Within hours, the security around me doubled. I couldn't go anywhere without guards. The brownstone became a fortress. "Who's doing this?" I demanded. "Why?" "Someone who wants to hurt me," Dante said, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "And they figured out the best way to do that is through you." The second threat came a week later. A message left on Dante's phone. A man's voice, speaking Italian, but Dante translated for me later. "The girl dies unless you back down." I'd never seen Dante truly angry before. It was like watching a storm form. Terrible and beautiful and absolutely destructive. He made calls, issued orders in a voice that made hardened men flinch. People scrambled to obey, but he also held me every night, his arms a cage I didn't want to escape. "Nothing will happen to you," he whispered into my hair. "I swear it on my life, on Marco's life. You're safe." I tried to believe him, The situation resolved itself in ways Dante never fully explained. The threats stopped. The extra security remained, but became less oppressive, and life slowly returned to normal, or what passed for normal in our world. 6 months after I'd moved in, on a warm April evening with the garden blooming around us, Dante took me outside after dinner. Marco was upstairs doing homework, and the house was peaceful. "I have something for you," Dante said, his hand in his pocket. My heart started racing. "Dante, let me say this." He pulled out a small velvet box, and my breath caught. "Alessia Russo, you walked into my life when I was drowning in grief and darkness. You saved my son. You saved me. You've made this house a home again, filled it with laughter and love and light. I know I'm not easy. I know my world is dangerous, and my past is dark. But I swear to you, on everything I hold sacred, that I will spend every day for the rest of my life protecting you, cherishing you, and loving you with everything I am." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, a deep blue sapphire surrounded by diamonds, stunning and unusual and perfect. "Marry me," he said simply. "Be my wife. Be Marco's mother. Be mine, officially and forever. Let me give you my name, my protection, my everything." Tears streamed down my face. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, Dante. Yes." He slipped the ring on my finger. It fit perfectly, because of course it did. Dante never did anything without careful planning. And then he kissed me with a passion that made my knees weak. "Mine," he murmured against my lips. "Finally, completely mine." "Yours," I agreed. "Always yours." Marco appeared in the doorway, clearly having been watching. "Does this mean Alessia is really going to be my mama?" "If that's okay with you, Piccolino," I said, opening my arms. He ran to us, and Dante scooped him up so we could hold him between us. Our little family, complete at last. We married in a small ceremony in the garden 2 months later, just close friends and family, nothing ostentatious. I wore a simple white dress, and Marco was our ring bearer, beaming with pride. When Dante said his vows, in Italian, then English, his voice steady and sure, I cried happy tears. "I, Dante Valentino, take you, Alessia Russo, to be my wife. I promise to love you fiercely, protect you always, and spend every day proving that you made the right choice in trusting me with your heart. You are my light in darkness, my peace in chaos, my home. Ti amo, tesoro mio, per sempre. I love you, my treasure, forever." When it was my turn, I held his hands and spoke from the heart. "I, Alessia Russo, take you, Dante Valentino, to be my husband. You've given me back my dreams and given me new ones I never dared to imagine. You've shown me that love can be fierce and gentle, that protection can feel like freedom, and that home isn't a place. It's the people you choose. I love you, and I love Marco, and I choose this life with you, per sempre, forever." The kiss that sealed our vows was witnessed by cheers and applause, but I barely heard them. All I felt was Dante's arms around me, his heart beating against mine, and the absolute certainty that this was where I belonged. A year later, I stood in the same garden, watching Dante push Marco on the new swing set we'd installed. Our son, because that's what he was now, legally and in every way that mattered, had grown taller, more confident, happier. He laughed freely now, made friends easily, and only had nightmares occasionally. I'd finished my degree, graduated with honors, and started working as a translator for an international nonprofit. Dante had been in the front row at my graduation, Marco beside him, both cheering louder than anyone when I walked across that stage. Life wasn't perfect. Dante's world still intruded sometimes. Moments when he had to handle things I couldn't know about, when tension crept into his shoulders and shadows filled his eyes, but he always came back to me, to us, and let the love we'd built chase away the darkness. And I'd learned that sometimes the most unlikely love stories were the truest ones, that a waitress and a mafia boss could build a life together, that danger and devotion could coexist, that home was something you created, not something you found. "Mama," Marco called, "come push me higher." Mama. The word still made my heart swell every time. I walked over, and Dante pulled me against him, his arm around my waist, his lips brushing my temple. Happy, he murmured. I looked at our son, flying high on the swing with pure joy on his face, looked at this man who'd turned my world upside down, and then carefully put it back together in a better shape. Looked at the home we'd built together, brick by brick, moment by moment. Happier than I ever dreamed possible, I said truthfully. Good. His arm tightened around me. Because you're stuck with us now, Tesoro. Forever. Forever, I agreed, leaning into his warmth. And as the sun set over our garden, painting everything in shades of gold and rose, I knew that this complicated, passionate, impossible love was exactly where I was meant to be. Sometimes the best stories start with a scared child and a kind gesture. Sometimes they lead to forever. This was ours, and it was perfect.